everyone. Welcome to another special episode of Over-Caffeinated. I'm your host, Mark Cunningham. And as always, we're joined by Beacon CEO Justin Owen. So we're very lucky to be joined by one of the most famous economists in the world, in world history, really. He's so famous that he's known as the father of supply-side economics. So he was on Ronald Reagan's economic policy board, and he also serves as an economic advisor to politicians such as Margaret Thatcher and Donald Trump. He's the founder and chairman of Laffer Associates. So please welcome Dr. Art Laffer. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Laffer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. How did you know I named one of my children supply side economics?
And a great first joke.
Isn't that a good way to do it?
Does that fit on the
that economics? Oh, but that's the name of my fourth kid.
Does it fit on the birth certificate?
Yeah, there it is. It's on the birth certificate.
Well, I do have one anything you want these days, so that's perfect.
By the way, Justin.
You do what?
I have one that has 5. It's sort of a Spanish type of birth certificate. It's Lottie Bunny Betts Laffer Myers. Well, that's one of my grandkids. So
wow,
we got some fun birth certificate stuff. Sorry.
Well, that's awesome. So let's start in a place, Dr. Laffer, where you're, a clear expert, property taxes. So Tennessee is one of the very few states without some type of property tax cap. And our recent poll shows that voters are not happy with that. Only 11% of Tennesseans believe decisions on property taxes should be left solely to the local mayor and city council or county commission, while 74% of residents believe the state should have some say in property tax increases, whether it's statewide regulation and local decision-making or an outright property tax cap. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on these results?
Well, I thought they were still a little weak. I thought it should have been 99% wanted property tax limitation and 1% couldn't read and write. So therefore, they didn't know what the question was. There is no one I know, if you talk to them, that doesn't want limitations on taxes everywhere, and that they should not be the subject. They also, all the people I ever talked to, want to make sure that the fallback position is not always to raise taxes. That you get a budget and you live within your budget. That's where I would come out of. And property taxes, especially, are subject to this. And I could go through that with you if you want, but where do you want to go from that? But I thought the results were good.
Are you surprised that, Democrats and independents are also for this? It's not just a Republican issue, but it seems like everyone across the political aisle agrees with this.
Well, let me just say that everyone lives, is a homeowner, is a renter, or is a retiree. Everyone in the world is. Now, when you do these other polls, not everyone pays the income tax. So therefore, a lot of them like it because they don't pay it. But every single person is impacted by the property tax. And when they think about their own circumstances, would they like to have some uncontrolled, out of control entity deciding how much they have to pay for where they live? They've got to live somewhere. And everyone knows it's just totally inappropriate to not have some restrictions and some controls on.
Absolutely. So Justin, I'm going to go to you now. Why do you think that, amending the property tax, current situation is so important to Tennesseans?
Well, because it impacts their bottom line, and it's tighter than it's been in a long time. They're paying more for gas. They're paying more for groceries. Inflation is really impacting Tennesseans' budgets. And so when they don't have extra money to spend, and then the government comes in and says, we're going to take more, that's a very hard thing for them to make ends meet from a budget standpoint. And so they're having to make sacrifices. They expect their government to make sacrifices too. And unfortunately, as we've seen over the last few years, local governments aren't doing that. We've got 20, 30, 40, 50% property tax increases on Tennesseans. And it's not like, even with the income tax, I hate income taxes. But if your income goes up, then you can afford to pay a little more in the tax. With property taxes, a lot of people are in their homes. They don't have extra income, and their situation hasn't changed, yet they find themselves paying 50% more in taxes. They don't have the money to pay that. So it really is starting to drive people out of their homes. It's starting to price people out of the ability to buy homes, to rent homes. It really is it's a kitchen table situation for many, many Tennesseans across the state.
Can I add one thing to it too? This is the property tax is a different type of tax than we're used to seeing, Justin. You know this. And an income tax is a tax on a flow, and you tax your income once, then what you got is after tax. But a property tax is a wealth tax. And let me, if I can, just go through this with you carefully, because not you guys got it, but let me, you have a bond that yields 10% per annum. Let's say it's $1,000 bond and it has a coupon of $100. And let's say it's an infinitely lived bond. This is very similar to what a property is. A property is a capital asset, whether it be your home or your farm or your factory or your office place, whatever it is. And it has a yield of living services or workplace there going on and on and on. And the value of your property is the discounted present value of all the services that property yields to you to give you the value, just like a bond. Now let's imagine we have that $1,000 bond. It's a coupon of 10% a year, $100 per year, okay? And let's imagine the interest rate outside is 10%. So the value of the bond is $1,000. It yields $100 per year, and that's their market. Now let's imagine we put a wealth tax on that bond. Now let's make it small. Let's make it a 1% tax on that bond, all right, per year. Okay, just like a property, just like what happens? Well, what happens is now you're going to have a $10 tax on that bond. So instead of receiving $100 in services, you're going to have to pay $10. You're only going to get $90 worth of services. The discounted present value of that $90 now is $900. By putting a 1% property tax on the bond, all right, the government collects $10, but the value of the bond falls from $1,000 to $900. You lose $100 for that government to collect $10. That's ridiculous. Now, let's say they go to 2% a year, which, by the way, that's Memphis. That's Memphis on residential. Memphis on
commercial is even more.
Industrial and commercial is 3% plus. Okay, let's say we go to 2% now. It becomes $20. So that yield now, instead of being $100, is now $80, and the value of that bond goes from $1,000 to $800. You lose $200. You lose 20% of your wealth because of that. Wealth taxes are very, very different from income taxes, and as such, what these tax increases have done have not only hurt the people who have to pay them and their incomes and their on their being budgets and all that, and it destroys all their wealth. If you look at the places in the United States where we have the highest property taxes, Detroit, their property taxes in Detroit proper go up to 28% of the market value of the property. Those properties now are $7,000, $8,000. All right, because they've depreciated. In Chicago, there are people today trying to give away their property. Give it away. Please take it so they don't have to have that contingent liability. All of the high property tax places in the area are the most depressed places: Hartford, Bridgeport. Even if you look at Texas, Houston, and Dallas, property values are really low because of these property taxes there. It's tragic. And just for the record, too, and I'm not one to get into all this other stuff and, DEI and all that, but these property taxes are really discriminatory against the poor, the minorities, the disenfranchised, because people in St. Louis in the poverty areas, or in California in the poverty areas, whatever, those people don't have the ability to move like you and I do. So you find that Memphis is predominantly, this is Black neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, ethnic neighborhoods, and they're getting killed. That's where the highest property taxes are in Tennessee. So this is, it's got everything wrong with it in the modern day world. And your points are totally right. And then there's the wealth destruction point, which just destroys the ability of these people to ever find a way out of their poverty.
And that's
I don't mean to lecture, and excuse me for going crazy. But I get worked up on this stuff. It really does irritate me enormously when I hear these politicians bloviating about, well, you're taking away local control. Local control to do what? To hurt your residents?
Mm-hmm.
How does it make any sense, Justin, to balance a city's budget by unbalancing all the residents' budgets? It's not just one for one. For every dollar they take, they cause you to lose $1,000. That's not a good trade-off at all.
Well, that's a great
Sorry,
point.
I don't mean to get wound up on you.
No, it's great.
There you go.
People think of it as a one-time cost, but it really is, like you said, it's wealth destruction, not just an extra tax increase for the year. So
that's huge wealth destruction. Yeah. Now, why do you think the latest one in California? Now, have you seen the new legislation that's being proposed in California on the wealth tax? Well, if you saw that, you'd see it. They're going to tax everyone who has $50 million worth of assets or more worldwide, they're going to tax those assets 1% per year. And anyone with $1 billion wealth worldwide, they're going to tax 1.5%. That's the new legislation coming through in California, with the one exception. With the one exception is real property. Real property, they can't do that. And the only reason why they're exempting real property, Proposition 13, which is the property tax limitation. You are not allowed to constitutionally in California to tax home values more than 1% per annum. That is the legal limit, period. And those property taxes are not allowed to increase by more than 2% per annum. That is the one thing that California has gotten right. And it's the one breathing hole that allows California to avoid being West Virginia.
It is crazy to me that, depending on how you look at it, we're one of only 4, maybe 5 at best states who don't have some kind of limit on property taxes. If even California can figure this out and limit property taxes, and local governments still exist there, and they do chagrin, exist in bad ways, but they aren't prohibited from doing what they need to do to provide infrastructure and to provide those basic services in 45, 46 other states. So we're really an outlier here, and the company's not good. We've got Vermont, we've got New Hampshire, you've got Hawaii, Connecticut. These are not friendly companies. These are not states that we want to be in the company of when it comes to, we're one of the few in the entire country that does nothing to protect individual property owners and individual renters from these massive properties.
God bless you. I love being in partnership with you guys. You're the best ever to be partners with, and we're going to win this battle. And it doesn't matter how many evil forces are emanating from the antediluvian swamps of the Inland Empire. We are going to win on this.
Because it's the right thing to do, and it's the absolutely necessary thing to do for the taxpayers of the state.
Exactly. And we're going to get it, and everyone understands it. And I think if we explained it to any of those people who did your polls, the 74% that said they really want it would go up to 99%. And the other ones probably were speaking some language that we've never heard of and didn't understand the question and just randomly made a mistake.
Well, getting 74% of people to agree on anything's a big deal. So even though we do higher,
these days, very good.
With you, I'm just joking.
So let's move on. Let's move on to a little bit of a politics question. It's officially 2024, so it is a presidential election year. And we kind of have as close of a race as possible. The primaries are about to get underway, but it's very clear from betting markets and polling that former President Trump and President Biden are the huge favorites in their primaries. So let's talk about the election with you, Justin, first. Vegas has about a 50-50 race. You've seen the polling. Obviously, I think Tennessee is Trump's a huge favorite here. But what is your opinion about what is going to happen based on the polling you've seen, based on what's happening in the country right now?
Yeah, I think we're facing Trump Biden again. I just don't see any realistic way for it to be different on either side for any Republican to overcome President Trump, and similarly for any real challenge to President Biden's nomination. So I think it's going to be the two of them. Over the past probably 6 months, I've said, and I've had a lot of donors ask my opinion about this, and I think that Biden has the edge. If you look at, state by state, national polls, yes, Trump has begun to rise, but you can't really look at national polls when it comes to the presidential race. You have to look state by state at the Electoral College. I do think it's tightening, and I think that there is a potential that Trump could pull this off over Biden, but I think it's going to be neck and neck all the way through, really. And I still probably give Biden the slight edge on this one.
You're like 60-40, like your opinion?
I don't know if it's 60-40, maybe like 52-48.
Oh, so really close.
A little bit different with the odds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, I like the gambling odds. So, Dr. Laffer, I know that you have a little bit of a horse in this race, but I do want to hear your opinion, kind of from taking a step back. Who do you think is going to win the next presidency?
Oh, I'm going to just go. I am not an expert on this. I've been wrong more times than you can imagine, and never deliberately wrong. But I'm just going to let Justin be the arbiter of this one, and I don't really have anything to add to what he said on that subject.
Perfect. So close race, and we'll see what happens. So I know that this is kind of a more fun question. And before we kind of ask Dr. Laffer about some of his interesting hobbies, but a recent Forbes article showed that 40% of Americans plan to travel more in 2024 than they did in 2023. I know that both of you are avid travelers. And my question, we'll start with Dr. Laffer on this one, is do you have any trips planned this coming year? And where does the next place that you would like to go that you've never been before? So I know that you travel a lot. What is your opinion on that? Do you have any trips planned for this year?
Yeah, let me just say that I'm 83 years old. I am, and so the sort of the desire of traveling. I just canceled a lecture series in Japan because I just thought of getting in the plan. And what I've got lots of stuff to do here. I love Japan. I've been there many times. I just decided I really just don't want to do that. So unless there's something really pressing, I really am going to limit it. But I have been traveling a lot internationally, Islamabad, Tashkent, and all these weird places, as well as London, Paris. And I don't plan to do much more traveling this year than the traveling I have to. I have traveled all my life, and I do not travel for pleasure. I go to my farm up in Kentucky, and that's where I really get pleasure. My home here in Nashville. I just love being home. I got my dogs, my family. I mean, so I am not a traveler for pleasure ever.
Very cute dogs too. We saw them before this. So can you tell us about your farm in Kentucky? It sounds really interesting. So it's a beet farm, is that right?
What? No. It's a meat farm, not a beef farm. I do have 50 head of cattle.
Okay.
They're called Angus crosses, but that's just for a hoot. I don't make enough money on that to cover any of the. Well, I cover little expenses, but I got a little over 1,000 acres up there, and I just have a really comfortable place. I've got my cat, which lives under the house. I've got geese. I've got chickens. I've got turtles up there. I've got my head of cattle, and I have my properties, my ATV, and I love it. And it lets me start worrying about things that are really important, but they aren't worldwide important. One of our calves miscarried and had a problem. I mean, God, that's a serious problem. I've got to get the vet. We have pink eye, and all of these things, which takes me away from all the world, the property tax issues, the Trump issues, all of these other issues, all of a sudden fade into the background for the 2 days I go up there every week, and then I can come back and face the real world with the problems, fresh-minded.
So that's kind of your escape, your place to escape, and just
that's my escape, totally my escape. And I planted, I think, something like 70,000 trees on my property.
Oh, wow.
So, in the olden times, these small farms with their hollows and their pastures and stuff made sense for a family, but they are commercially not viable at all. So all of these pastures that have been built out no longer make any economic sense to anyone. So what I've been doing is planting the pastures back out into a nice big collection of trees from all over the world. And I'm a really big tree collector in California. I probably had one of the best private tree collections of anyone in the country. And I'm trying to sort of do that version here in this climate.
We're going to a question about that next. You have to hold that one. But so what about you, Justin? Justin, are you? Is there anywhere that you're traveling this year that you're looking forward to?
So our goal is to do one international trip a year, leave the country once a year. We actually even made it through that during COVID. We had to limit it to the Caribbean, but we didn't break our streak even during COVID. So we're going to do France this year. Of all the places we've traveled, been to almost 24 countries. We have never been to France. And so we both, Kara and I, my wife and I, both love wine and love French food. So we're going to go spend a couple of weeks in the south of France this summer.
Now, you know why the French only have one egg for breakfast, don't you, Justin?
Oh, I don't know.
Because one egg is enough.
That's awesome.
That's a great note. So Dr. Laffer, I have two questions for you before we go. We really appreciate you joining us, but you talked about how you're a big collector, and we talked a little bit before, and you collect fossils, furniture, trees. What is the one piece in your collection, the most interesting thing that you have ever collected?
Now, what I also added to you in the conversation we had was I also collect family. I have 6 children. I have 14 grandchildren so far, and I have 4 great-grandchildren. So I would put them first, always.
You're number one. So after that,
I have a Barhonia from Holland, pre-Armada, that's ivory and ebony made. Barhonia is a desk done by a general in the war. So they put up their tents and they have their furniture come with them. And a barwenia is a piece of furniture that would be carried around for generals. So this is pre-Armada. So it's a Spanish desk that was in the Dutch military prior to the Spanish relinquishing control of Holland with the Armada. Usually when the British defeated the Armada, they lost their colony, which was Holland at that time. So that's my neatest piece. That's really fun, cool. I don't know if it's my most expensive piece, but it's just way cool. About 1,500, and it's a nice thing, and it rolls down. I mean, little drawers, secret drawers, all sorts of cool stuff.
That's really awesome. Neat. I love coming to your office because you do have just it's like an art museum almost. You've got these amazing artifacts. And so it's always fun to walk around and look at everything.
Thanks. And what about you? What do you collect, Justin?
Well, I've got a little boat there that I brought back home from Ireland. So I love things like that. And it's not necessarily boats, but we do like to collect art from our different travels around the world. So we'll just go into a little shop and we'll see something and decide that that's what we want to remember that trip by, and then bring that back home with us. That's
great. That's loads of fun. And France, you're going to really, you probably have gone to France a number of times, but
no, this is our first time. So surprised.
Oh, really? Well, yeah. I used to be on the board of Vivendi, Environnement, Veolia. And I used to go 3-4 times a year in Paris. Oh my God. It is so cool. You will love it. And can I tell you?
I'm excited. We always bone up on the language a little bit too, do the Duolingo app to learn a little bit of the language. This is the hardest for me. I don't have an ear for French like I do. Portuguese actually was fairly easy. French seems very difficult to me, so I'm going to have to rely on my wife.
You'll have to remember that joke about the one egg.
Yes, I'll have to say that. I might get kicked out of the country for it, but
now there's the other one too. Do you know about the French grandmother?
No.
Her cat had 3 kittens. She put the 3 kittens in a bag with a stone, tied a knot on it, took it down to the Seine River, and threw it in. Do you know what you call that? 1, 2, 3, cat sank.
Sorry, you've got good ones.
I'm just giving you some ammunition for going over there. They'll love those.
Some good dad jokes for France.
That's great.
It's fun.
Great. I didn't know we were going to stand up comedy. That's excellent. So the last question before
I'm sitting down, young man. It's not stand up.
So the last question before we let you go, Dr. Laffer, is, as someone who was obviously, very close to former President Reagan, I mean, we see his name mentioned all the time in the current political climate. A lot of times it's positive. It's Republicans saying, I want to be like him. Sometimes it's Democrats saying you should be more like him. What is your thought about how he's viewed today and how kind of opinion of him has changed over time?
Well, success, as you know, the old saying goes, success has many parents and failures are always orphans. And when you look back at the economy, you look back at the world, we had peace, calm, quietude. I mean, it was an orderly world. There were no race riots in the 8 years Reagan was in office. We had no major wars. All of that was a very calming, good period. So as time gone on, that period has been remembered by everyone as being a really great period. So Reagan's reputation is much higher today than it was at that time. I can remember they used to call, they used to say his elevator doesn't go to the top floor. They tell you he was a racist, a bigot, all of these things they would say about Reagan. And of course, all of them were untrue. He was really wonderful, and not only wonderful personally, but he was very intellectual and very policy focused. And so I think his reputation is increasing, and people are holding him out as being an example. Even Democrats are now, of a great president. And he was. And, Reagan's old motto was just very simple. I think it's Justin's model as well. Don't just stand there, undo something. And Reagan undid so many things. He lowered the top tax rate from 70% to 28%. It's a pretty big tax cut. He cut the corporate tax rate from 34%, from 46% to 34%. We went from 11 tax brackets down to 2 tax brackets, 28 and 15, and that was it. I mean, all of these things he was able to do. He was able to defeat the Soviet Union, without losing any U.S. troops. I mean, this is all the dreams. The last president who had anything like that was John F. Kennedy, who did very much the same thing and very much the same way that Reagan did it. And, you know, those things ring very true to people today. And I just love it. I think Trump was very much in that light. In fact, I have argued to people that I think up until the pandemic, Trump's presidency was even better than Reagan's was up until that time. It was just really impressive. Transparency, corporate tax reduced from we got it down to 21% from 35%. You know what he did to the pass through. We got the personal income from down to 37%. You know, he did the Operation Warp Speed, which shortened I mean, just amazing. All of these others, the energy decontrol he did, and the amount of increase in production of energy for the U.S. So in 3 years, he did an amazing amount of really good economics. Now, I only talk about economics. You notice I dodged that question that you asked, Justin. I don't do politics discussions or healthcare or other stuff, but Trump did all of those things in economics, and it was an amazingly good record on economics. Now, you may not like what else he did, and I also find it very hard to believe that we would be in the problem in Ukraine today if Trump had been president. I find it very hard to believe that we would have the problems in the Middle East with Hamas if Trump would have been president. I just can't imagine that. But that's just me. So that's where I'm coming out. Reagan is really respected today much more than he was back then.
And rightfully so.
And rightfully so. Correct, just completely correct.
Well, Dr. Laffer, we appreciate everything you've done for our country, first of all, and everything that you've done, you know, economically to put us on the path that we're the positive path that we're on. And we also
for our state specifically, Paul
right.
tax repeal, death tax repeal. We've worked really close together over the years.
We did.
To cut taxes. We're tax slayers. And
tax slayers.
To doing it yet again when it comes to keeping.
We got to win this one. We got to win this one.
Well, we appreciate your support, and thank you so much for joining us. And again, we look forward to working with you on the property tax cap, and thanks for everything you do.